How much does it cost to move to Dubai? If you're thinking about moving here, it's probably one of the biggest questions that's on the forefront of your mind right now, particularly if you're planning to set up your own business to do so. Okay, so let's start off with registering a business because that's what I've done. I've registered a company out here which has a trade license, and with that trade license also comes a residence visa because your company essentially sponsors you to live here. Now, to register a business, you can do it all on your own. You can fill in the paperwork, but I think it's really, really mindful that you remember that you've got to deal with liaising back and forth with the government departments out here if they have any questions. And bearing in mind, this time of year, there's a 4-hour time difference. In the summer, it's about 3 hours. You need to be mindful of that. So for me, I went via an agency. And there are lots of agencies that exist that do specifically that. They register businesses for people looking to move here. Now, I paid £5,946.43 to an agency to do all of the work for me. And within that, I got a consultation around what free zone should I essentially register my business in. There are lots of different free zones in the UAE. So you've got Dubai, you've got Sharjah, for example, you've got Ras Al Khaimah, there's a whole host of them. Now, where you register your business in terms of the free zone can impact the price. So my license for Dubai, for example, in a free zone here is slightly more expensive than if I'd registered, say, in Sharjah. But I was told that, when you're trying to get into business and do business properly, sometimes it's better to have a Dubai free zone. What I would say is if you're looking to move here and you're looking to do that specifically, speak to the agency that you pick, take their counsel. Their job is to kind of help you set up the business, but also bear in mind that you might have a budget and see what will best suit your budget, because after 2 years, there are certain things you can actually change. So you're just doing this to get established here, right? So definitely take some counsel from people. Now, when your company is actually registered, you get your residence visa as part of that. You also then get an Emirates ID. Now, an Emirates ID is really, really important. And this is what I found out. You can't do anything without your Emirates ID. You can't open a bank account, you can't get a phone contract, you can't rent or lease a car over the long-term period, you can't even buy a car really without an Emirates ID. So Emirates ID is crucial. So much that I did a post on Instagram because the day that I got mine, it felt like a moment that you'd kind of work towards. So Emirates ID is important, but before you get your Emirates ID, you also have to pass a medical test. So what they're looking for is they're not going to approve you to be fit to work in this country if you have HIV, tuberculosis, or hepatitis. So those are the 3 things. Now, in my case, I had to wait 3 to 4 days and had to take additional tests because I had pneumonia a few years ago. So there were scars on my lung. So they thought that it was a lung condition that would have prevented me from actually working here. And that was a little bit nerve-wracking, if I'm completely honest. And if you do fail your medical test, by the way, you get deported. So a really big tip for you. If you are going to move here, make sure that you get screened at home. I did get screened at home. I had a lung x-ray, I had blood tests and stuff like that before I got here. But when you're in the thick of the moment, it's quite nerve-wracking. So get tested beforehand. It's really, really, really important you do so. Save you stress and hopefully prevent you from having spent a load of money only to find out that you don't pass the medical test and you've got to be deported back home. Now, business bank accounts. Bank accounts can be a little bit tricky out here. I opened an account with a bank called Wio. They're very similar to like a Starling back home. Easy process, but lots of questions on the business side. On the personal side, not so much. On the business side, lots and lots and lots of questions because you have to make sure, and what they're looking for is they want to make sure that your business activities are in line with the trade license and the company that you've registered. So just be mindful of that. But that's a business registration. And again, the cost will vary depending on where you register your company in terms of the free zone and the agencies that you go with as well. I'm more than happy to do an introduction to the guys that I used. Gareth and the guys were absolutely amazing. If you're interested, make sure that you join the Telegram group, which is linked in the comments section, and I'll make an introduction there. One of your biggest costs moving here is going to be accommodation and rental costs. And much like any other major city in the world, New York, Paris, London, Dubai's rental market is reflective of the demand of people wanting to live and move here. And with that being said, it's really important that you get ahead and do your research before you actually move, to understand, number one, what your budget is, what property you can get for your budget, and get an idea of where you actually want to live. Now, typically in Dubai, in the UAE, landlords will take payment for rent in advance. So typically 1 year in advance, so you need to have enough money for a year's rent. Some landlords will take 2 checks, which will be one every 6 months. You might even find some that will take a check every quarter or so. But it's important for you to do that research and be prepared to actually know that. Now, where you buy in itself is a different thing altogether, because as you can imagine, I'm in a place called Town Square right now. It's relatively new, it's quite family oriented, it's quite nice. But the rents here are very, very different to, for example, JVC, right? Which is literally just down the road. And you also need to be mindful of what kind of property do you actually want to rent? What kind of property do you need? Do you need a 1 bed, a 2 bed, a 3 bed flat or apartment? Do you want to go into a villa? These are all very, very important considerations. But rents can vary quite vastly compared to here and somewhere like Dubai Marina, for example, where I have a friend who currently lives in Dubai Marina, is paying £3,500 a month for an apartment. I had a friend last year who was living in the Twisty building down in the marina, and he was paying circa £5,000 a month for an apartment. So there are budgets to fit all kinds of people's wants and needs. The important thing is for you to kind of get a good understanding of what you can afford and what you can get. Now, you can use sites like Bayut, for example, which is effectively the UAE's version of Rightmove or Zoopla. You can look at property prices based on areas, and I've just put a montage of, say, if you're looking for a 1 bed, for example, in Town Square, in JVC or Marina, what the prices are. Again, they vary vastly depending on the property, amenities, so on and so forth. Now, if you are moving here with a family, it's really important not to forget school fees. Education fees in the UAE can be quite expensive depending on the type of school that you choose. You've got American schools, British schools, international schools. Schools here are very much treated as a business and built as a business. With that being said though, one thing that I do love about this city is the fact that it is very, very family oriented. And you'll see this in the communities that they're building. Even in Town Square, for example, we have little zones, splash pads for kids, lots of activities for kids. It's very family oriented, and it gives the city a very wholesome kind of like feel. I mean, even here in the marina right now, there are lots of kids around, families walking around. It's got that nice vibe. The facilities are there to nurture children, and I don't think that's something that we necessarily can say we have in the UK. But when it comes to education fees, be prepared for it because it's not cheap. Here is a little bit of a screenshot that I did a little bit earlier on, again, in research for this video, just kind of giving an idea of the cost. And I believe that these costs are per term, by the way, so got to be prepared. All right, so there's a couple of other things to talk about. The first one is medical insurance. Now, I talked about this in my last video. And if you are coming here to register a business and that's going to be your visa, having medical insurance is part of your visa requirements. It's not going to be a big deal if you're generally healthy. If you have a pre-existing medical condition, it is going to be an issue because you need to figure out how you're going to have yourself covered if you need medical attention for your pre-existing medical condition. In my example, they're going to rate my premiums. So, which means that because I've got pre-existing, I'm gonna have to pay more for the insurance because they will deem me as being a higher risk of them having to pay out because of my pre-existing. If you're generally healthy though, you should be okay. If you're a healthy individual, you're probably looking at about maybe 4,000 to 5,000 dirhams a year, and that translates to just about £1,000 or so. Not too bad at all. For me, where it's gonna be rated upwards, I think it's gonna fall in between maybe maybe even £15,000 for the year. So it is a cost that needs to be considered, bear that in mind. The second thing is, and let's perhaps walk when we do this, the second thing is cost of living. Dubai is an expensive city, and obviously with accommodation, that's obviously a cost, but food cost is very expensive here. And that's because mainly they have to import a lot of this stuff. So when you go and you do your weekly shop, you'll find that meat, poultry, some snacks, if they're especially the stuff that you'll find in the shelves in Tesco's, those are quite expensive. I hear people spending stupid amounts of money on just food. And one of the things that is great here, but can also be a curse, is things like takeaways. Very, very easy to access. You can literally get anything ordered and have it delivered to you within an hour. And that goes for food, goes for electronics, goes for anything. They've made things very, very easy here. So the cost of living, just be mindful of that. Fully expect that the first time that you get here that you're going to have quite an expensive month. You will do, because you're not going to understand where to go to get the best deals, so on and so forth. I think that's normal, but I think what will be really important for you to do as you get kind of more acclimatized to the way things work here is you'll figure out where you need to go in order to get the best deals and so on and so forth. But what I'm saying here is you need to be financially prepared for the fact that things are going to be a little bit more expensive than what you might expect them to be. Not all the time, not everything, but as you are kind of getting your feet planted in, you'll kind of know where the tricks are. Last thing, and this is really important, do not come here without an emergency fund. I saw a guy on TikTok. He came here to be a real estate agent, came with 3 months emergency fund, nowhere near enough. His deals took 6 months to get paid. He's running on credit cards, not a great place to be. Ideally, I would say, just to be safe, you want to give yourself 6 to 12 months in an emergency fund. And that should be all of your bills. So if your rent's already paid up front, your cost of living essentially. Now you do have utilities here. It's called DIWA, so it's electric, water, aircon, that kind of stuff. You won't know what that is until you get here, but it's still relatively cheap. It's not a lot of money. But I would say just make sure you have ample money in an emergency fund to make sure that you can cover yourself for an extended period if anything were to go wrong. Now, obviously, if you're building a business here, it will take time. I'll do another video around networking and what that is like here, because it's a fast-moving city. Boy, and it's a learning curve. But look, those are the main things that you need to be mindful of. Actually, there's one more point. Let's talk about that before we finish. Transportation. Now, I've already covered this in my other video where I talked about buying a car here. Please go watch that. But at a very, very high level, look, you want to be prepared, and you want to be clear on what you're going to do for transportation. So I'm in the marina right now. The public transportation system is not far from here. So if you lived here, you could jump on the public transportation system, but it's not going to get you to everywhere you need to go in Dubai. So if you're not going to be able to rely on that, then you have the option of either Careeming everywhere, which is basically their Uber, or renting a car. Now, when it comes to renting a car, what I found being the issue there is that you're paying a lot of money for the kind of car that you get. Take a Nissan Sunny, for example. I mean, this thing is expensive. I think when you do the conversion, it's about over £300 a month for this car. If you want to jump into a medium-sized one, you're paying more. If you want to jump into a luxury saloon, then you've got to pay even more for that. So you may decide that you buy a car. You've got to factor in the money for that. Now, I bought cash, but you can get them with a 20% deposit, but then you need to be able to show income for 6 months before you get a bank loan. There's a lot to think about there. And then finally, one thing I do want to say is that if you are employed, you're coming to this country as an employed person, so you've got an employment contract, most of the stuff is going to be irrelevant to you. You don't have to worry about your medical insurance. You won't have to worry about your visa. You may not even have to worry about accommodation costs, because you might have that included in your contract, or you might get an allowance within your contract. So things become a little bit easier if you're coming here on an employed contract. But if you're coming here on a freelancer visa, for example, where you've got to set yourself up, you really need to think about things properly. What I would love you to do is, if you do have any other questions on any of this stuff, then there'll be things that maybe I won't even think about making a video on that you want to ask. Leave them in the comment section. I will try and make a video on each and every single one of them. But as we get more established and we continue with the channel, what will happen is, once the podcast is up and running, we'll have experts that will come in and talk about those topics specifically. I'm talking about this from my own experience. So on business registration, for example, we have Gareth, who did my business registration, come in. We'll have a lot of experts on different things, visas, all that good stuff. So what you can do for me, just to make sure that we can make this sustainable, is please subscribe to the channel, smash the like button. It just means that other people will get to see this, because the YouTube algorithm will recommend it. And yeah, show your support, hit that notification bell. I appreciate you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I tried to jam pack as much value into this as possible. So let me know whether you did find it valuable. I'm gonna go off and head back. See you later.